Hello, everyone. How's it going? I thought I would chat a bit about community and what it means to be in community, why so many people are interested in it, and is there a way to actually make sense of community where we can live in some sort of communal way without getting too bogged down on the ideals? Now, I live in a place that's pretty is an understatement, spiritual. I feel like I can't walk down the street and bump into somebody without them mentioning the word community or living on land or tribe every 15 seconds. Understandably, it can get a little bit tiresome at times, but I do get it. There's this desire in our world, when in the American dream we've been sold on, everyone can make it themselves and be on your own and have your own little home and keep everybody out and whatever. I understand why people are going back to this way of wanting to be more connected, not just to themselves, but to other people, to a greater purpose, to have, gatherings and shared interest and people working towards something. But the reality is we're living in this modern world, and unless you want to just go live off in the woods and try to make it work, it's challenging and people are frustrated. And we have a baby due literally any day now. I mean, her due date is technically today, even though I'm discovering that the due date doesn't really mean all that much, unless you're being induced. But it's moms struggle, parents struggle, families struggle, individuals struggle, and they come to places where they see, videos, people posting ecstatic dance and, rock climbing and snowboarding and all these groups of people getting together. And yet they come and I see a lot of people posting or talking about just feeling like isolated, feeling like they don't really have their tribe, they haven't found their people. Now there's a few things to get into, and I could go on, but the first piece we'll talk about is that the illusion of community is real. Like I said, people move to places because it sounds like, oh, this is a really conscious, connected place. And then they go to this big dance and everyone's free and they're flowing and they're alive and they're chanting and, they get together after and they hold hands and it's like, oh my God, I feel so much connection and love and I feel so seen and honored. And that might be beautiful in that moment, but then they go home and they're still living in their apartment by themselves, cooking their own meals, and struggling to kind of make sense of this isolated life. Now the interesting part is I live in a place where people value community and talk about it all the time and they still feel isolated. But then you take other places where there's just people aren't even conscious of it and everyone's living at home doing their own thing. So it's an interesting concept. It's very, there's a lot of nuance, I would say, that's involved in these conversations. So I'm not here to say I have the answer. I just want to explain some different things that I've seen to try to make you just maybe feel more at ease in this space. So one piece is that, the grass is always greener. And in America, this idea of you can make it on your own, even in the homesteading world of self-sufficiency, everywhere you look, there's the self. And the issue with the self is like the antithesis of community, right? If the individual self that has their own individual desires, that within itself is kind of the isolation of community. And of course, if you look at a lot of ancient texts and teachings, the ego is the very thing that makes us think we're separate, makes us think we're alone. So when people come to these places and they see, some semblance of consciousness and connection, it's still often the ego desiring some kind of connection. So when they look there deeper and they realize that maybe it's not what they thought, or maybe there's actually drama. I've seen this a lot in these conscious communities where people go in, they get excited and they get, mystified by the whole thing. And then they start seeing all the drama and the chaos and they're like, oh, this is just like being in high school. That's a common thing that I hear people say all the time. It's like, oh wait, it's just drama and ego and people wanting this and hierarchy. And it seems really loving and accepting on the outside. But then when I get in there, people are conniving and backstabbing and all the stuff that you see in the movies. So to go back to the thing about being in America in general, and let's take out spiritual communities for a second, this idea that we can make it on our own is a lie. It's a scam. It's a scam. It's a conspiracy. But the reason I say that is because the very idea of us being alone is an illusion. So let's say you're like, oh, I'm living the American dream. I get up every day. I work hard. I've got my own company. Or, I work for somebody. I make my money. I come home. I can buy the foods I want. I can cook the things I want. I can make a choice. And I have this sense of freedom. But you might think that you don't have community. You might think that you're doing it on your own. But what are you relying on? First off, you're relying on your job to make money. You go to work and you have things you have to do. And then you're taking that money and you're going somewhere to pay for it. So maybe going to Walmart and saying, oh, wow, this place has all the food. It has every ingredient. It has every product I could ever imagine, from my car, from my garden, from my household. You know, that might seem like you're making it on your own, but you're relying on this place. So suddenly it's something like a Walmart or a Costco or Acme or wherever becomes a big piece of your community. Because if you really look at the community on a simpler level, and the word community, commune, to kind of commune, to come together, our community has been sold in a different way, but it's still what our community is. You know, going to Walmart, that's the people that we're around, the way we get the things that we need to sustain our life. Now, I'm not here to say anything's wrong with that, but rather to recognize that we all have things that we're connected to, that we're reliant on. Even if in the movies and if in the commercials you can make it on your own. Everyone can come here and make it on their own and do your own thing. And, you know, it might seem nice and it might seem like, oh, I have this independence, but it often leads to this deep depression for people. I had a friend a number of years ago, like during the pandemic time, and she was going through a lot of changes and kind of struggling and feeling like, you know, she kind of found her community here, but she felt like she needed to travel, and she was going on this big camping trip and was worried about not having, you know, people and friends in connection around her. And, you know, here I was barefoot, side of the mountain, just looking around and saying, you know, look around. Your community is everywhere. It's not just people, the plants, the trees, the bugs, the animals, the birds and the bees. It's all together. It's all working with you together. And when people come to these places and they look at community on the surface of like, oh, I just want to have my tribe. I want to have people that get me, that understand me, that know me, that love me and support me, and I want to support them, and da-da-da-da. We're often disconnecting ourselves from nature, which is, importantly, it's this beautiful sense of connection that's just there. Nature is here, and we can work with it. And the more I work with animals and with land and growing food and foraging, the more I see that connection. I'm like, oh, I'm always in some semblance of community. Even if my idealized mind might think of community as like, oh, you know, 100 hippies dancing barefoot naked around a fire in some land, and we all cook our food together, and, you know, we grow our own food and we're totally self-sufficient. That might be the idealized version of community. But really, community is ever, all the time. And when we think that there's something that we can get and then we'll be fulfilled, it's no different than like, oh, once I have this much money, then I'll be happy. We're always chasing something because there's always something more. It's the energy of how we think we need to get things that keeps us stuck in the loop. If we think once I have this external thing, then I'll be fulfilled, well, then we get that external thing and we're not fulfilled. We're like, well, then it must be something else. Let me just get this one other external thing. And we get stuck in the rat race. So take that in for a second. Really feel into what that means. What does it mean for you? What does it mean about your ideals of living in connection and community? Now, another big piece that has really hit me living in Colorado, and I feel really grounded and rooted here, although who knows what the future will bring. But I think about my ancestors coming over from Eastern Europe, not knowing anybody, and being in this totally new place and starting a whole completely different life. Now, maybe they didn't see the fruits of their labor like their kids did. But when you think generationally, like, you know, Aja and I moving out here, starting a family, making friends, and our family and our kids, they make friends and they get married, and all of a sudden a few generations from now, and there's this whole web of people. It's the same thing that happened with my family and with my parents. So it might seem like if you're moving somewhere new and you're trying to create this sense of community, and yes, I'm now talking a bit about people that stray away from home, not to say that's right or good, but just as an example. Well, I recognize now that I might not see the vision that I have in my head, it might not come to full fruition while I'm alive, and I'm okay with that. Because if I'm so consumed with my own desires and my own needs and my own wants, I'm not looking at the bigger picture of what it's going to actually mean for my kids and their kids and kids after them. And that's just shifted my perspective in such a big way, because I'm not so concerned about living this life that I dream. All I can do is every day take, you know, barefoot steps more and more towards the things that make sense to me. But I'm not thinking, oh, I need to be on land with 100 people and start an alternative school and do da-da-da-da-da, and then I'll be fulfilled. because I'll always be in some space of this pressure for community or this external idea to fulfill me. Whereas I feel fulfillment in my life right now. There are things that I would like to see different, that I would like to change, but I'm okay with the slowness of those changes. Every day I learn. And maybe I have an idea where it's like, oh, this would be so great if we only had this in our life. How cool would that be? But I'm also not attached to that being the way. Just because it's an idea that seems really prevalent or seems really interesting doesn't mean that I think it's going to fulfill me in some greater way. It doesn't mean I'm like, oh, once I get this thing, then I will have the thing. I stay present in my day. I recognize if I do something, I feel rushed or I feel stressed or something, I try to just pause and check back in. Because the journey for me to get back to this place of wholeness hasn't been by externally creating things. It's been by, sort of internally destroying and burning down all the falseness within me. And it might seem like beautiful in some ways, but it's also like a war. I had to go to war with my false self and fight through that battle, just like, Arjuna and Krishna, right? If you know about the scripture there. And in doing so, came to this place of peace, came to this place of, oh, wow, community is just another false concept to get me caught in something. But what feels right and what feels true is creating connection in the place that I'm living, creating connection with people. We invite people over for song circles and to share meals, and we go meet at parks, and we work together and we build together and we grow food together. And I don't know where it's leading, but I know that when I'm outside and I'm digging, a garden bed with a friend and we're having a conversation, I know that it feels really good. And when I get together with friends and we sing songs and we improvise and we share music, I know that feels really good. And when we break bread, I know that feels really good. So when I'm in that place of trust and of knowing and of understanding, something starts to shift, something starts to change. And I remember that there is no separation. There's no place that I need to get to. And that community it's in here, it's out here, but only when we've seen through the veil. It's not a grasping, oh, I need community and then I'll be fulfilled. No, I'm already fulfilled. And then those things just start to make sense, and then I can pursue them with ease. So when we create this space of being able to pursue the things that make sense to us with ease, then we're not holding on, grasping, desiring, trying to control. We're just allowing what wants to come through. And from that place, we can look around and realize that there's no place to get to. And we're already fulfilled. And if we're seeking and thinking we need something, well, we need to look again.